Hey there, I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're going to talk to you about the safety bike boom of the 1890s. So my tales of Chetzemoka follow the adventures of a group of cyclists in the 1880s and 90s. And of course it starts out in the high wheel era and then goes to the safety bikes once we hit the 1890s. And the first book with a safety bike mentioned in it really is Sparks Press, where Felix fantastically destroys his high wheel and has to get a new bike. And so Jacob, as the owner of the bike shop, convinces him to get one of these brand new safety bikes that are just coming out on the market.
Now, safety bikes had actually been invented in 1885, and as the name might indicate, at first they tried to sell them on safety, that they were safer than the ordinary bicycle, the high wheels that everyone was really riding at the time. That didn't work too well, in large part because they were heavier, they were more expensive, they were more complicated, so they were more prone to breaking down. They had a rougher ride, so they weren't as comfortable.
They were slow.
And they were slow. They didn't make any records, they didn't win any races or anything like that, and so they were not a large part of the market, and they were almost none of the racing market, at least modern type safety bicycles in terms of having same size wheels and a chain drive to the rear. There were safety ordinaries that were very different and that did actually do okay.
That's another discussion.
But it's another discussion. The safety bicycle that we're really talking about really took off in the early 1890s with the invention of the pneumatic tire.
Mm-hmm. And that was Dunlop, an Irishman.
Yes.
He first started filling tires. He was trying to make a better bicycle for his little boy. And first he tried filling the tires with water, and then his family said that he should really try air.
Yes, water was rather heavy,
yes,
as you might imagine. And so the sort of air-filling tires really made a huge difference. And his kid loved it, of course, and the rest is history.
Right. So, as someone who spent several decades in the bike industry, why don't you tell us a little more?
So the pneumatic tire really, it was a giant game changer, especially for the smaller wheeled safety bikes, because it allowed them to ride more comfortably because they could absorb shock in those pneumatic tires without adding very much weight. Because those pneumatic tires could absorb shock, then they were able to use lighter weight materials for the rims and save weight that way. So they used wood in the rims instead of steel, which they had been using. They could also use lighter gauge spokes because, again, a lot of the shock was being taken out of the wheel by the pneumatic tire.
And the spokes were a lot smaller than the spokes on an ordinary anyways.
Yeah. Lighter gauge and then shorter because of the size of the wheel.
Right.
Then because of the chain drive to the rear, they could gear these bicycles up to be able to go as fast as an ordinary would with each pedal stroke.
So, a little bit of review. An ordinary bicycle is fixed gear direct drive. So every time that great big wheel goes around once, you travel exactly the distance of the diameter of that wheel.
And during that, the pedals are going around once.
Right. Now, with the chain drive on the safety bicycles, they could make the wheel go around more than once for each pedal stroke, and so that made them a lot faster.
And they could change that gearing out, so that depending on the conditions or the course, on the same bicycle, the rider could change gears beforehand. They didn't yet have the ability to change gears while you were riding, but you could swap out cogs and such and alter the bicycle if you're a racer trying to make things better for that conditions that day or the conditions of that track.
Right. And the other thing that was a real game changer about the new safety bikes was that an ordinary was sized to a man's inseam, like a pair of pants. It was sized to his leg length.
You really had no adjustability for the seat height.
Right.
Just a very small amount.
Right. And if the wheel was too big, he couldn't reach the pedals, and if it was too small, then his legs would get caught under the handlebars when he tried to pedal.
So on a safety bike, on the other hand, you could adjust the seat height in a wide range, and therefore you could adjust the handlebar height more easily too. So you could adjust a bike to fit many people, many different heights, and that meant that the dealers had to stock fewer sizes which brought the price down. And also, every wheel was the same size, no matter what size the bike was. So every rim was the same size, every tire was the same size, all the spokes were roughly the same length. And so it reduced costs.
There was some variation in frame size, but not as much. It wasn't as big of a difference.
You'd have 2 frame sizes perhaps, or possibly 3, instead of having between 8 and 12 wheel and frame sizes on an ordinary.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that brought the cost down.
Right. And there's a common misconception out there that women didn't go cycling before the safety bike. Now I want to blow that out of the water as fast as I can, because in the 1880s, when the men were riding the ordinary bicycles, the high wheels, women had high wheel tricycles. There were a lot of women who had these. They were popular amongst the athletic women.
And the wealthier women.
And the wealthier women. The real athletes. What happened when the safety bikes came in was safety bikes were a lot cheaper. They were cheaper than the ordinary high wheel bicycles. They were dramatically cheaper than the high wheel tricycles, because the high wheel tricycles were a very large, very complicated machine that required a lot of very expensive high-grade steel.
And also involved a lot of patents for particular technologies, from the differential, rack and pinion steering, all sorts of different things that basically made them possible and better to ride. And the people who still owned those patents wanted to profit off of them as much as they could.
Right. So the high wheel tricycles, like I have, like the ladies have in my books in the 1880s, those were very expensive. That's why the character in my series who has a trike just like mine is the timber baron's daughter. She's an heiress.
Yes.
Mine wasn't quite as expensive as hers, but we won't go there. I got a good deal on mine. But anyhow, the safety bikes were much cheaper.
So they brought a lot more women into cycling in the
Right.
1890s.
Right. And the frames for the women's bikes were a little bit different from the frames for the men's bikes. Men's bikes had a diamond frame, which is structurally very strong. Women's bikes had a drop frame to accommodate the skirt. And there were a few more differences between the men's bikes and the women's bikes in the 1890s. So the women's bikes would have that drop frame to accommodate the skirt. They also had a guard over the chain to keep your skirt out of the chain. And
A guard over the rear wheel as well. It was
Right.
composed of a fender with a lot of strings to basically make up a lot of the protection in a lightweight way.
Right. So there were a lot of modifications that were just a lot of modifications. Isn't the right word?
Adaptations.
Adaptations.
Mhm.
Yeah. Some slight differences in
Yeah.
the ladies' models versus the men's models.
Now, one of the things is that despite all these added-on accessories and the sort of things that were required to make it work for women in their clothing of the time, they were also really concentrated on making them as light as possible in the 1890s. They knew that women tended to be lighter weight and smaller, and they wanted to keep the bicycle feeling as light and nimble and lively as the men's bikes did. And so they made those women's bikes even lighter to compensate for the added weight of all these additional components.
And the fact that women do tend to be lighter than men did allow them to make that drop frame.
And to make lighter gauge tubing work for all of that.
Right, because the ladies' frames didn't have to be quite as strong as the men's frames, because women tend to be lighter, which helped a lot.
Yes.
And then there were just some, what one might call aesthetic modifications or jewelry modifications. One of the best examples of this comes up in the last book of the Tales of Chetzemoka, when someone with a Tiffany bicycle comes into town. This was
At the height of the bicycle boom in 1896, Tiffany, the jewelry company, decided to get in on the action and produce an ultimate sort of jeweled bicycle.
right.
With gold and silver chasing and plating, with jewels embedded in things. It was incredible.
Yeah, there's one of those in the Smithsonian now, which seems rather incredible, but
Yeah.
very cool.
And it's one of those things where there were also different colors available, especially in some of the women's bikes. That was some.
Well, there were different colors available in the men's bikes too.
There were, and some brands made their whole sort of visual identity around a certain color that was not black. So
right,
that
like the
people-
yellow fellow.
Exactly, the yellow fellow, which was, well, actually orange, but we're not going to get into that. Orange was considered, it was a fairly new color, and there wasn't real consistency in naming it.
Right.
But picture like a safety orange bicycle, and then building or branding around that color.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But there were different options of these.
Yes.
But anyhow, because these bikes were so much cheaper than anything that had been around so the 1880s high wheel era sort of set the scene. It set the scene for these high-tech, expensive machines that basically created the market. Everyone saw these fairly well-off guys
Yeah.
riding these amazing machines that could let you go farther and faster than a horse, under your own power.
Yep.
And everyone wanted them, but at first not everyone could afford them. When the safety bikes came in the 1890s, everyone started being able to afford them because the price went down so much.
It just expanded the number of cyclists until, again, in 1896, at the height of the bicycle boom, it seemed like everyone in America was riding a bicycle.
Right.
And there were cartoons about it. There were, just sort of all sorts of things in popular culture referencing it.
Right.
Articles everywhere about the bicycle.
Right. There was even a spoof someone did of Ella Wheeler Wilcox's famous poem, "Laugh and the world laughs with you,
Right.
Cry and you cry alone." Someone wrote a little spoof of bike and the world bikes with you, walk and you walk alone, but you can't get into society unless you have a wheel of your own.
Yes.
So, becoming very mainstream. But of course, the shame is that once they were mainstream, they no longer had the cachet that they'd had when they were expensive, because
Right.
now the riffraff could have them.
Right. It wasn't as much a form of conspicuous consumption anymore. And those elitist cycling clubs started to fade out when
And-
everyone was able to have a bicycle.
And their members got into automobiles because that was the next big thing.
And next, airplanes.
And yeah,
Close on the heels of the automobile.
right. People always have to find something more fancier and more expensive
And faster.
as their sort of their elite status items.
Exactly, yeah. Showing up on a bicycle was no longer, showing that you were at the top of society.
Right.
And so that's when you start to get songs like Daisy Bell, where the person can't afford much, but
Right.
he can afford a bicycle built for two.
It won't be a stylish marriage.
Right.
I can't afford a carriage.
Yes.
But you look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two.
And that's an example of one of the very few songs that was a popular song in the 1890s that people still recognize today.
Well, it was used in 2001
Yes, it definitely was.
when the computer is
But it
dying.
was used that way because lots of people still recognized it in the 60s,
Right.
and now people still recognize it too.
My memory of that song, that's actually a very poignant one. I was visiting a relative in a nursing home, and someone who was, no one I knew, but who was also in the same nursing home, this little old woman saw me walking down the hall, and she just burst into that song. She just looked at me, and she got a big smile on her face, and she suddenly started singing, "Daisy, Daisy, give
You must
me
have
your
reminded
hand."
her of something.
I must have reminded her of
Yes.
something or someone.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was very sweet. I was only a teenager at the
Mhm.
time. But yeah, very well-known
Yeah.
song.
And it really does exemplify that shift in the bicycle world from being a vehicle of the elites to being a vehicle for everyone, and especially an affordable vehicle for everyone.
And now everyone can have them.
Right. And I highly recommend you read some of the books towards the end of Sarah's series because they do a great job of capturing a lot of that.
Thank you, my dear.
Mm-hmm.
So, have a great day. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And, like Gabriel said, remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!